Everyone. Uh, my name is Matt Harnack, and I'd like to welcome you all to the very first episode of BrightSign Live. And in today's session, we're going to be discussing BrightAuthor Connected 101. So I want to make it clear that this is an introductory course. We're going to be talking a little bit about the basics of player setup. We're going to get into presentations, publishing, and scheduling. And I first wanted to give you a little bit about my background. My background is in video production, and I I've been at BrightSign.
About 2 years now, right? 2 or 3
Yeah,
years? Yeah,
since
about that.
2018.
Yeah.
I heard that somebody was saying that they couldn't hear me, but I think that it's working now. But yeah, I've been here since 2018. And you might recognize my voice from some of the tutorial videos. And I wanted to stress that I'm not an engineer. I'm just a filmmaker who loves pixels and aspect ratios and ultra HD displays. So when I started at BrightSign, I wasn't quite sure that I was going to understand the software. It was a little intimidating. So I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to understand the ecosystem. And that's why I've created a lot of content so that everyone can understand. And it's also why we've created this show. So this show we're going to try to do 2 shows a month and cover basic topics like the one today, BrightAuthor Connected 101. And we're also going to cover more advanced topics as well, like hopefully we'll get to video walls. Today, I'm joined by John Arnio, a solutions architect for BrightSign. John, can you tell me what kind of projects you do for BrightSign and what kind of work you do here?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Matt. So, yeah, solutions architect, it's kind of a broad term, but we share a lot of common, goals here. I work a lot with our customers to try to find the best solution for their projects. Really, it's about, educating on our software, our ecosystem, our platform, and just trying to figure out the best way to get there because we've got it's a wide open, vast ecosystem. There's a lot of ways you can get something done. And really what it's all about is, being able to effectively communicate it and really try to simplify this ecosystem for people. And in a lot of our conversations, and this applies to everyone at BrightSign, there's invariably two questions that we get asked. Number one is, can this be done with a BrightSign? And of course, the answer is yes. But the follow-up question is, okay, how? And can you show me? So that's really what I dedicate a lot of my time to is really answering the question of how, and creating demonstrations and proofs of concepts and, trade show marketing materials and that sort of thing. So, that's really what we all do at BrightSign. I mean, you included, it's always answering that question of like, how can we do this? How can this be done?
Well, I'm really excited that we're both here today to talk about this stuff. What John and I have in common is that we both are really passionate about content and building different we're both content creators,
Yep.
and we're excited to show you how to create really engaging, memorable digital signage experiences within the BrightSign ecosystem. So John, can you tell us a little bit, just walk us through the agenda for today?
Yep. Let's do that. Okay. So, like Matt said, this is BrightAuthor Connected 101. We're talking about the software. This is our software. This is a 101. We consider this to be beginner level. We're not going through really advanced topics. We're going to try to cover, the whole spectrum of what's possible. Give you a really high level view, kind of skim, through it. It really just gets you thinking about some of the possibilities. And like Matt said, we are absolutely going to deep dive into some of these other more complex topics. We're going to, take requests. We're going to have special shows that cover certain things. So that's not for today. Today is all about just getting started and just trying to get your head around, how all of this works. So here's what we got lined up. Um, First, we're going to do a quick overview. I think it's important to really establish the taxonomy, how we describe the different concepts in our software. That can be a little bit, overwhelming for first time users. We are going to touch a little bit on the hardware because, after all, this is an ecosystem we're talking about. We are going to create and publish a presentation live on air, uh, we are going to go through device setup and provisioning, which is a big, part of our ecosystem. It's a huge feature that we have. And then we're going to talk about some cloud stuff. We've got a control cloud, we've got a content cloud. And we're going to talk about what those are, what they mean, how they work with each other. And then we are going to answer some questions. So
All
that
right,
brings
that
me.
that sounds great.
So I would say
Um,
if you have a question, we should direct people to use that in the Q&A. So in the live stream there is a Q&A section. So by all means,
yeah,
we've got that being monitored. So submit your questions there as we're going through this.
yeah, that's right. So basically, we have a chat function on the right-hand side of the experience, and you're welcome to ask any questions you have in the chat. So let's get started with the software. Can you tell us a little bit about BrightAuthor Connected and how it's connected to our web services, BSN.cloud?
Yep. So there's a lot to unpack here, and the thing to remember in all of this is that BrightAuthor Connected is a multi-purpose tool. You can do a lot of different things with it. It can serve a number of different purposes depending on what you're looking to do. First and foremost, it's free, so that's a big deal. It's a free application. This is a cross-platform application. You can download a desktop application and run it on a PC, on a Mac, and additionally, you can run it in a browser, which is a really cool feature. And the experience is the same across all of these platforms. So, with that said, you could do a number of things with this application. This connects directly to our cloud services. And broadly speaking, what we have is a cloud service called BSN.cloud, which is comprised of our control cloud and our content cloud. So these are the two cloud services that are under this umbrella of BSN.cloud. So again, with the terminology, this is the important stuff to remember here. Control Cloud, first and foremost, is free. This is something that is built in to our players. This is part of the operating system. This is something you get with the hardware. It's not something you have to pay additional for. And this is a great technology that you can make use of in BrightAuthor Connected to manage your players. You can check their status, you can check their health, you can reboot them, you can see if they're online, that sort of thing. This is all stuff that we're going to show you in Control Cloud here in a bit. Now, the
I wanted
content.
to just hop in real quick.
Yep, go ahead.
I wanted to mention that we also have a number of CMS partners. CMS stands for Content Management Solutions. And basically, uh, if you have, we have many different integrated CMS partners. And if there's a piece of software that you really are drawn to, we are partner friendly. We love our CMS partners. And if there's a piece of software that you want to use with a BrightSign player, you can deploy that BrightSign player and provision that BrightSign player to utilize the CMS software of your choice. So I really want
Exactly. And
to
that's
make that clear at this point, because right now we're talking about BrightAuthor Connected, but there are a number of pieces of software that you can use with BrightSign players, right, John?
Yeah, and that's a great point. So, as we talk about our content cloud, that is an example of a CMS. That's our CMS. So if you were to pay the subscription and make use of that, then you have the ability to store your multimedia content in the cloud and have access to that content to your players and to build out your presentations. But like Matt said, you're not restricted to using it. That's an option. You can choose to use ours and you can make use of it in BrightAuthor Connected quite seamlessly. Um, CMS partners is a very cool feature that we have.
All right.
And each of these,
Well,
like you said, these are built in to BrightAuthor Connected as well. So, again, if you wanted to choose to use our Content Cloud, you could, but you can additionally make use of these partners.
that's a lot of different options. Well, let's just stay focused on one thing that all of these CMSs and along with ours have in common, which is our hardware. Can you show us a little bit about the hardware that we use and what we're talking about today?
Yep. let's do that because I think this is an important. We're not going to spend too much time on this, like I said, because we could dedicate an entire hour or two talking about the hardware lineup and the various configurations. But I think it's important to kind of set the stage of what we're doing because we're talking about using BrightAuthor Connected to author and publish presentation content to a player. So, you can't do this without a player, clearly. So I think it would be helpful just to talk a little bit about what does that mean. So what we have here is one of our players. This is the flagship XT1144. This is my favorite player. And I want to talk about the bare minimums. This is what you need to have available and work with if you're going to use BrightAuthor Connected, if you're going to create a presentation and get it running. There's some bare minimums to start with. So, first of all, what you need is power. So that would be a great place to start. As you look back here, we've got a power port, so we're going to plug that in. That's bare minimum number one. Number two, as we flip this over, what we have is a port for an SD card. So this is a micro SD card that actually goes into the player. And the reason I bring this up as one of the bare minimums is that your content is going to live on this SD card. This is not a scenario where this player is somehow tethered or connected to your authoring computer. In fact, what you're using is your laptop, your desktop, your MacBook, whatever you have to create your content. You're going to end up publishing it to this card, and this card is going to hold that content and it's going to stay in this player. And at that point, this player is ready to function on its own. So I think it's an important point to make because that can oftentimes be you know a confusing issue at the very beginning when you're just trying to understand how all these pieces work. So and then obviously the other bare minimum is you need a screen because that's what we're talking about here is digital signage. So power, SD card, and screen, those are the absolute bare minimums to get started technically. Now, I should say, ideally, what you should be doing is plugging this in to a network. So those would be your four that I would recommend: SD card, screen, power, network.
And one thing that I wanted to hop in, actually, I'm going to mention two things. One thing about this particular player is that it has a special feature, which is power over Ethernet. So you can simplify your deployment and you can use power over Ethernet instead of using the AC power
Yep.
that's provided with the player.
So
And
here's a
the
magic
other
trick.
thing I
Let's pull the
wanted to
power.
mention, yeah, you're going to unplug it. That's cool.
There you go.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that if you plug in a USB mouse or you plug in a display that has touch capabilities via USB, you basically get interactivity just by plugging into USB. So those are
Exactly.
some really cool, simple features that we can just talk about right now. There's a bunch of other stuff too, but we're going to
Oh
hang
yeah,
tight
yeah. Absolutely.
and
No, the USB is a
stop there.
great that's a great point because, for touchscreen, for that sort of the interaction, USB ports, that's how you would get that connected. So that's a great example. Okay, so what we need to do now is let's get back on track with the software. So
All
Bright
right.
Author Connected. Um, Before we hop into the software itself, I think it's important to start talking about, again, the taxonomy, the hierarchy, all the little proper words that we use to describe things. So this is how we would describe, in a very, very simplistic, diagram, the publishing concept. And this particular publishing type is when we're making use of the full BSN.cloud. So this is our content cloud and the control cloud, and putting all of those pieces together in BrightAuthor Connected and making presentations. There's a couple terms that we're going to use, and we're going to repeat them over and over. And these are the terms that you need to remember because they have special meaning. Number one is the publish type. That's what we're talking about here. Is we're using BSN.cloud as the publish type. We have this overarching group called a network. A network is something that you set up with you get an email address and you can create one or more networks under that email address account. Inside of each one of those networks, we have a concept called groups, which we will show you. A group is almost like a folder. It looks like a folder visually in the application, but what it really does is it holds a schedule, and a schedule can hold one or more presentations. And this is something we'll show you visually as we go through the workflow of creating. But just understand that group holds a schedule, schedule holds one or more presentations. And BrightSign players go into groups, and when they are in those groups, they can actually uh, download and play the schedules that belong to that group. So this is just a quick, kind of graphical way of showing that hierarchy in place.
Well, that's really cool. That makes a lot of sense. I think it'd be really great to see how this works in the software and in the real world.
Absolutely, absolutely. One quick thing before we jump. So, we are going to talk about some of these other publishing types, and I do want to point out there's one slight difference. When we are working in a local file network publish type, meaning let's say you're not going to use the content cloud, and you're going to work locally on your network. It's still fundamentally the same concept that you're working with schedules. Schedules hold presentations, and players can play those schedules. You just don't have the added functionality of groups, but you do have networks. And in both of these scenarios, you can have multiple networks, you can have multiple groups. So this is all about flexibility and giving you the options and allowing you to figure out the best fit for what you need to do.
So it sounds like if you are a BSN.cloud content cloud subscriber, you get this functionality of groups, but you still have a way to organize your players, even if you are a control cloud only subscriber. You can do it through networks. Is that right, John?
Exactly, exactly. That's a great way of thinking of it. Yep.
Cool.
Okay.
All
So
right. So what's next?
let's do it. Let's actually build one. Let's go start to finish. I think this is what we're going to do here is we kind of affectionately call it the speed run, but we're going to go start to finish. We're going to build a presentation, and we're going to get it onto a player, and we're going to show you kind of the start to finish workflow. And I'm going to go in real time. I'm going to move kind of quickly. We're going to step through it, as quick as I can. But I'm going to talk through some of my thought process, some things that I want to make sure I remember, I keep track of, some pitfalls, that sort of thing. I'm going to call out these specific terminologies and these important things you have to remember along the way. And then once we breeze through that, then we're going to kind of slowly step back through and kind of unpack what we just did. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to make a menu board. I've got a project already designed, and this, again, from a content creator perspective, is important because we've already, uh, worked in our Adobe Creative Cloud, applications to design this menu board. We've got our videos, we've got images, we've got all of this figured out. So now it's time to implement it, and that's what I'm going to do here. So first things
And
first.
that's a really good point. It is important to do some ahead of time planning with this stuff. You want to know a little bit what it's going to look like. You want to have an idea of what this thing is going to look like so that you can execute it really well.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. So what I'm going to do here first is just to demonstrate this. I know that I'm going to build a presentation. I'm going to make use of some of my content, which I have stored in Content Cloud, but I'm missing a piece and I need to upload it first. So I'm going to go over to my content library, and I'm going to check in my left-hand panel here. This is my Content Cloud folder structure. So I'm going to look in Media, and I've got a folder already created called Bake Shop because we're going to do a Bake Shop menu board. And I've got a series of 7 videos already in here that I'm going to make use of in a playlist, but I'm missing my menu. So what I need to do is get that uploaded. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to upload new media, and I'm going to choose my destination folder that's going to go into the Bake Shop. So I'm going to set that folder, and then what I'm going to do is drag and drop my menu image. So I've got a static image that's created for my menu, and I'm going to upload that content. So media has been uploaded successfully. So we're good there. All right, so now my content is already in place. I've got everything I need. Let me double check here. 7 videos, 1 menu board. That's good. So now we're going to hop over to the next tab to presentation. And we are going to make a new presentation. So we're going to hit the plus sign. And here we are at the beginning. This is how you start to build a presentation. So first thing first, we're going to give it a name. Let's call it Bakery Shop. And below here, we have a number of options. These are very, very important options, and you don't want to just simply breeze through these. The first is the target device. The target device has a very special significance because based on the device that you're using, you may or may not have features available in BrightAuthor Connected when you're building your presentation. So you do want to make sure you have the appropriate device. Some of this has to do with the ports that are available on the player. Some of this has to do with the video decoders that are available. So you do want to make sure you pick the right one. I am using our XD1034 in this example. I'm using an HDMI connector, 1920 1080, 60p, and landscape orientation. So
So it sounds like you want to match the player to the software so that the software knows how to treat the player.
exactly, exactly, and to make sure you have the right options available. If you, for example, know you want to play two videos in zone simultaneously, then you need to have a player that can actually do that. And if you pick a player that doesn't, then you're not going to have that capability in the software. So just definitely, again, part of the planning. So we're going to hit start and we're going to drop into this view. Now, right out of the gates, this view can be a little confusing at first, but this is your canvas. Think of this more of like your building blocks of where your content is going to go. These are the zones. Zones have special meaning to us. So this is a canvas where you can build zones of content. You are not restricted to just one zone. You can have as many zones as you want, and depending on your player, of course, you can arrange them, for video or image playback, depending on what that player's capabilities are. So um, you can resize, you can arrange these, you can layer these, etc. Now, I am going to work with a video background zone first because I know that my background of this presentation needs to be a video playlist. So what I'm going to do is with this zone selected, on the right-hand panel here, we have a bunch of panels that are basically property panels. This is consistent across the UI. A lot of things that you select in the main canvas have properties on the right. What I'm looking at in particular is the type of zone. Right now it's set as a video or image. I'm going to go ahead and make that a video only. I'm going to make it full screen, 1920 1080 in the upper left 00. Name I'm not going to worry about too much right now. So what I want to do now is actually put some content into this zone. And to do that, you double click. So we have now double clicked into the zone. We're now working with this video zone and we're going to put content into it. So at this point, I have a couple choices. I can work with some media assets or I can work with widgets. But to simplify, because I know I'm just using videos, I'm going to use assets. So I'm going to open up this little panel here. I'm going to browse to my media, to my bake shop, and I've got my 7 videos. And if you remember, we had 7 videos and an image, but we only see 7 videos. And that's because it intelligently knows that I should only be working with videos here. So that's good. So I'm
Ah,
going to
because
grab
you have a video only zone.
exactly, exactly. So we're going to select these from the bottom. We're going to drag them to the top into the canvas, and we're going to create automatically in one step a playlist. You can see these little icons in between the videos, these little timer, media end. These are called events, which we will get into a little bit later. But automatically, what's happened is these videos will play in sequence, and they will loop back, and this will play on indefinitely. So you know what? I'm actually done. That's the end of that zone. So I'm going to back out here to the layout. You can notice up at the top, we have a layout and content tab. We have a little bit of a breadcrumb here to show the presentation and the zone that we're working in. So I'm going to back out to layout. I've got one more zone of content to add. I want to overlay my menu board image on top of this video zone. So I'm going to come up here to Navigator. I'm going to add a zone. And again, I want to make sure I match the appropriate type. I know specifically that I'm using an image only for this zone. So I'm going to change this to image. And I'm going to fiddle with the size and the arrangement here. And again, I already know this from my design. I've been working in Photoshop and I've got the size and the placement already figured out. So, I'm just going to make that match here. That's a good practice to have, is to make sure that, when you're authoring your content, you know where it's going to end up, and then you've got your zones appropriately sized to fit that. So
It can be useful to jot down some of your dimensions of the different zones in Photoshop so that you can match them in BrightAuthor Connected for
Yeah,
sure.
that's I do that a lot. I have a little scratch note with all these XY numbers scribbled everywhere. So it is very handy because when you comp up something in Photoshop, you kind of want to match that in BrightAuthor Connected. That's kind of how we do it as content people. Um, so again, as you remember from before, I've double clicked into the zone. Now this one's an image only. It's contextual. It figured it out that I'm working with images. It's not going to give me options to use videos. So now I'm going to grab my image, drag it in, and I'm done. So I'm going to back out to the layout. And before I save and publish this, we're going to check one last thing because we are working with multiple zones of content, and these zones are layered on top of each other. At least that's how I intend them to be. You do want to check. And to check that, you go to the navigator and you can open up this zone dropdown and you can see the layer arrangement of these zones of content. Now, interestingly, I've got two video zone layers available here. I've got one being used, and that's because I'm using an XD1034. It can make use of those two video zones, and I'm only using one right now. I've got a
So you
graphics
can play
layer.
multiple videos at once if you have that player. Is that right?
You absolutely can. You can. Yep, and not every player does it. So again, that's why it's important to pick at the time you
And that's
create your
because there's
presentation.
an actual decoder on the player or multiple decoders on the player. So this is a hardware decoder that's allowing us to play back the video. That's my
Exactly.
understanding, right?
Exactly, exactly. And so now the graphics, the image only zone is now sitting on top. So I can make sure, and I can rearrange these if I wanted to. If I did this, for example, video on top of image, this is not going to look so good. I'm going to lose my menu board. So I want to make sure this sits up top. So that's the last thing you want to check. Okay. So what we're going to do first is we're going to save. You want to save your presentation, save your work. And all this did is just saved the fact that I created this presentation and all of these changes. What I have to do now, if you remember from our hierarchy discussion, is I have to publish this presentation and get it into a schedule. That's the first step, right? So let's hit publish. And now you can see we're moving through these tabs left to right. We're sitting on the schedule tab. We first want to pick a group from the left, and the group has a special meaning. This is our group in uh, our network, which we'll show you in a second here. So we're going to pick the group first, and I'm going to go ahead and use my default group. That's totally fine here. And in the schedule, you can see already we have the presentation called Bakery Shop, and it's scheduled as an active all day, every day. This is what you get by default. This is a single presentation in a single group. It's going to run all day. You could choose to, make this run on specific days, or let's say I made a second presentation that only ran on weekends. This is where you would actually establish that schedule.
All right. So this is where you calendar your events, or this is where you calendar your presentations and
Yep,
what is displayed on the
exactly.
player on the
Exactly.
display.
Yep. That's exactly right. So you'd have a lot of flexibility here as far as specific dates and times, recurring events, that sort of thing. So again, this is an all day, every day, single presentation, pretty simple. So I'm going to hit publish. And now this publish button, we've hit publish twice, technically. The first publish was getting the presentation into the schedule, and the second publish was getting the schedule into the group. So now we've created that hierarchy we talked about before. And when we look at our network tab, we will see that we have groups. We have a default group available here. It already has a player in it, but that's the group that we're actually publishing to. So
So as
um,
soon as you publish to that group, whatever players are in that group will start running the presentation you've published. Is that right?
that is correct. That is correct. So I kind of foreshadowed a little bit. I do have a player in the group. Now we've had this player up on the screen this whole time with this activation code. So what you would normally do, if you're starting from scratch, is you have created this presentation, you've scheduled it, you've got it all ready to go, and you want to get your player into your network and running that presentation. So at this point, what you could do is activate it, get it into that default group, and it would start playing the content. So if I was to actually hit the activation code, then this player that's on the screen would go through, a reboot cycle. It would take several minutes to do, and we obviously don't want to wait for that. So through the magic of television, we are going to show you what this ends up looking like. And there we go.
All
So
right.
this is a player in this group running that presentation that we created. So let's take a look at this full screen. So
What I
again,
love about this is that the menu is slightly transparent. So
yes.
what we've done is we've used a PNG, and that format, that file format, respects transparency. And I think what you've done, John, is that maybe the black is 80% or something like that, maybe 60 or 80%. So you can see through the image, and it creates a really nice design with a very simple, it's a simple design, but it looks really elegant and it looks really good. Very professional.
Yep, that's exactly it. So this again, this is the image was created in Photoshop. You can take one of the layers and give it the transparency and then overlay on the video. So it's a good example of something that's possible, what you can do. So um, we are at the halfway point. So I think what we should do is let's hop back to our software. We did end up, through the course of this, discussion, land back on the admin tab here. So I think we're actually going to start on the admin tab, but we're going to spend some time here and actually talk about some of the other features and some of the other things you can do, to set up our players and work with them. So the very first thing we should talk about, I think, is really important, is the device setup. That's a big part of what you can do in BrightAuthor Connected. So I'm going to hop into this panel. This is device setup in the admin panel. And there's a lot going on this panel. So we're going to kind of break down what all of this means. What's really cool about the device setup panel is that you can create a setup package. You can define a number of parameters. You can basically tell how you want your player to get its content. And then you can save that device setup, and then you could apply that to other players. Or you can reprovision an existing player. You can make use of it, other than just simply right here on the spot for a single player.
That's really cool. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to provision a player. I think we're going to get into them in a
Yep.
moment, but it's just, this is a really core part of the product where you we have made this part of the product that is very much part of the connectedness of BrightAuthor Connected. You can apply these setups now remotely. Before, you could apply them by hand. And one of the big changes in BrightAuthor Connected, one of the reasons why this is so cool, is that it's actually something you can do now completely remotely.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's a huge feature here. So as we step through the package name I've given it, device name and description, I'm going to leave blank for a reason, and we'll show you why in a second. So we are going to set the time zone. We're actually both on Eastern time at this point, which is cool. You're normally West Coast, but now we're both East Coast. We're going to set an idle screen color of purple, just something other than black, I think is useful. And this is really where the magic is, the device type. So what we were talking about here is using this to define how your player gets its content. You can get its content a number of different ways. When we talked at the very beginning about the hardware, I said the bare minimum was a power, an SD card, and a screen. Well, you can use standalone as your type if you want. If you literally have no network and you just want to author your content directly to a micro SD card and then walk it over, sneaker net it to your player, plug it in, you can do that. Um,
So
we could
that's still part of the product. That's been a product and part of the BrightSign product since day one, right?
right.
And that's still something that we do today.
Exactly. Local file networking is kind of an extension of that. It kind of builds on this. So you can, as you work down, these get a little more sophisticated. So this is the ability to publish your content across your local network. So assuming your laptop, your workstation is on the same network as your player, you can author your content, publish across the network. And again, remember it's going to the SD card. So important thing to remember. Um, Building up on that one more, we've got BSN.cloud networking. This is what we just demonstrated as our quick run through. We were using the full BSN.cloud networking setup.
And you can see the groups right there. There's your default group.
There's my default group, right? So in order to make all that happen, I had a player on my network that was already set up with this specific setup package. Um, we have simple file networking, which is an interesting one. So it's a little bit of a hybrid, setup package. If you wanted to host your published content on your own server, like an FTP endpoint, for example, you could configure your player to do that, and it would reach out to that location and pull down its updated, published content from there. And then we have the big one here. This is the partner application setup, and this is a very cool feature about BrightAuthor Connected. Right here in the software, if you don't want to use our CMS, and if you want to partner with one of our CMS partners and make use of what they have available, it's right here. You can select it. So I can choose this button, and I can view. And look, all of these partners are built in. It's a part of
Wow.
the software.
We actually even have something on our website, which is the Virtual Partner Pavilion, where we've interviewed a lot of these folks, and you can check out the software yourself and see what piece of software works for you,
Exactly.
including BrightAuthor Connected, of course.
Yep. So, what's cool is you can pick one of these partners. You can create the setup package. You can apply it to a player. And when your player is done setting itself up, it is connected to that CMS ready to go. So assuming you've got everything activated on that end, it's seamless. I mean, it's a great process. So again, it's built in here. You can create these packages. And then again, we have a custom, which is a little bit of an extension of that if you wanted to actually be your own CMS. If you wanted to create a CMS of your own, this is a good way to sort of work with that process. You could put in a URL here and have all of your deployment package available there. So those are the setup types that you can save in these setup files. We have a couple other things we're going to run through really quickly here. The network configuration is important to note. This is a potential pitfall if you're not careful. When you are setting up a player for the first time, if you have very specific network conditions that you need to accommodate, like for example, a Wi-Fi, if you're using a Wi-Fi module, uh, VLANs, static IPs, that sort of thing, you can put all of that stuff in here in your network configuration, and you can save it as part of that package. If, however, you've already applied those network settings to a player and you simply want to change the type, what kind of player is it, but you don't want to wreck those network settings, you could tell it to use its current. So you could tell your player to preserve its network settings and just simply change to a different, device type. So this is a really great, way to use that feature. We've got a number of advanced, options here in the setup. Too many to go through today, but the big ones, in my opinion, is the OS update. It's built in here. So as part of this device setup, you can specify a release, production release of an OS, a beta release, a minimum, a custom, or not to update. So the fact that you can build that into the setup package is really handy. So, when you're
Yeah, totally.
when you're deploying a large number of players, like this could be a really great way to make sure they're all up to date right from the beginning when you start. Um, we have a number of logging, device configuration, diagnostic web servers, that sort of thing. A lot of stuff in here, which is stuff that we would probably get into more in the advanced topics. So that is the device setup. Now, what I think we should do.
And then there's a way to save that device setup to the library, right? The library is
Yes,
so cool to me. I love
exactly,
the setup
exactly.
library.
So let's take a look at that. So in that device setup option, we have the ability to save this. So when you come over here to your library, what we have are all of these packages that were created. So you can make as many of these as you want. You can have different types. If you had one for a CMS partner, one for local file networking, one for BSN, et cetera, et cetera. You can save all of that stuff here. So you have this library available to you. Now you're probably asking, well, what do I do with this library, right? So what's the point? And to me, the real magic is here in the device provisioning.
Right.
So using a device serial number, you can associate a device setup package to a player. So you can say, based on this serial number, I want this player to use this setup package. So if you pre-configured all of this stuff and you plugged your players in for the very first time, then they're going to reach out and figure out that they need to go and get these setup packages, get themselves updated, and operate, based on how you've configured.
And how do you do that? You click on the player and then you say apply setup. Is that right?
Exactly, exactly. So I have, 609 here, which is using default setup. This was previously activated. So what I could say is, you know what? Instead, I want to use my custom setup package, and I can apply it. So I've updated my record, in my provisioning table here, and really all I need to do at this point is go make sure that my player knows that it needs to get itself updated. So that's how you make use of it. And then the last piece of this is if you're working with a large number of players, you don't have to enter them in manually here one at a time. You can actually upload a spreadsheet. So I actually have one. I have a spreadsheet of like all of my players in a, serial number list and the name I want to give them, the description I want to give them. So when I upload those and I apply my setups, then they all get named, exactly how I want them to, which is really handy.
Wow. So if you were doing a deployment of like 10 players or a bunch of players, this would be a really great way to make sure that they're all on the same network and make sure that they're all configured properly.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Exactly right. Okay, so that is kind of a quick, overview of setup and provisioning. The next thing that we want to do is we need to talk about Control Cloud. I think that's a big part of this software. Again, we were talking at the beginning about all the things you can do with BrightAuthor Connected. Like there's a lot of stuff you can do with it. You can make presentations, but Control Cloud is a huge part of this. This is a major feature. So what I'm looking at here is my network tab, and I've got a player that I've already activated. It's running. I've got a green check. That means it's live, it's online, it's ready to go. And in fact, it is the one we were just looking at a second ago. It's probably this one.
Mhm.
Um, and what we have the ability to do through Control Cloud is actually drill into this player and look at it up close. We can actually inspect it. We can look at its remote diagnostics. We can do a number of things with that player. So we're going to click on
I
the
know that the
gear.
engineers at BrightSign are really proud of this feature, and they
Absolutely.
spent a lot of time making this useful because we've had the diagnostic web server for a long time, but it was only accessible if you were on the local area network. So
Right.
having this accessible from anywhere is a really big change. It's a leap forward for us, and it's part of the reason why BrightAuthor is now BrightAuthor Connected.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. Because that, and that's an important distinction. What we're looking at is, in fact, the diagnostic web server that's on the player. But now we are connected via WebSockets remotely to this from anywhere in the world, and we can interact with it in real time. So it's a huge feature. So just kind of briefly to go through what's available here, just so you're aware, we have some basic informational status things here. There is a log tab where you can see the real-time log of the player. This is significant if you're working with support. If you've got a support ticket or you're trying to troubleshoot, you're going to want to download the log and make that available because there's a lot of information that can be gleaned from looking at these logs. Um, we have a control tab, and this has probably my favorite button on here. Obviously, you can reboot. That's a huge part of this. You can do a factory reset, but the reprovision, this is the really cool button. This is the one I like. So when you want to change what a player can do, and I do this all the time because we switch players from CMS partners to BSN.cloud to local and back and forth. So once you've updated that provisioning record, you can come into the player and say update, and this player will instantly reboot, reach out to that provisioning record, grab the setup package, and then reconfigure itself based on how you defined.
And if you have a presentation running on that group that it's connected to, won't it start playing the presentation automatically?
Yeah, that's like icing on the cake right there. I mean, no pun intended, because we're using a bakery demo. But yeah, if assuming your device setup package, was a BSN.cloud and it pointed you to a group that had an active presentation in the schedule, yeah, with one button you can get this thing, instantly switched to run new content. So that's a really cool
So cool.
cool way to do it. SD card, you can see the contents. Again, remember, like I said, all your content lives here. So, you can actually get some visibility into SD card here. And this definitely helps with troubleshooting. We have a diagnostics tab. You can do a number of diagnostic things for troubleshooting, for working with support. Network diagnostics is a big one. I mean, this is probably the biggest thing we run into in corporate networks, is just trying to get these connected to make sure, that they can go through firewall rules and that sort of thing. So um, definitely a lot of stuff that you can do in here, including network packet capture, for Wireshark, that sort of stuff. And then we have a really cool one here. So, all of that was diagnostics about the player, but let's say we wanted to see if our player was actually playing the content we intended. If we're not sitting in front of it and it's not connected to a screen that we can see, well, we can generate a snapshot. So we can actually see, if you've got a little thumbnail here, this, of course, is our bakery demo that we created. So
Yeah,
this is
that's
a
a
real
great
time.
way to really see that your presentations are running properly, and just
Yep.
double check to make sure that if you can't be there, if you can't have boots on the ground, you can really check something remotely, which is just such a money saver, time saver, everything.
Exactly, exactly. And then a couple other tabs, we have video. So this tells you about the active connected screen. So this is very important for EDID, video modes, that sort of thing. And then we have an advanced tab. So this is another, again, the theme of flexibility. One of the features we have here is the ability to update your player. So that we covered that you could update your player through a device setup package, but if you don't want to reset up your player, then you could update it directly. So you can go to the player and actually update your OS. So that's a cool feature. So that, this whole thing, what we're showing, this is Control Cloud, right? So this is a lot of the stuff that's exposed through BrightAuthor Connected as part of this Control Cloud feature set.
And if you own a BrightSign player, it's something you have access to already. It's
Built in.
included
Yep.
with the player.
Yep. Exactly. It's part of the OS. It's not something we're charging for. So that's Control Cloud. Uh,
Okay.
what do we got next? We have something extra we want to do. We're going to spend a few minutes. We're going to try to be mindful of time, and we do want to do some Q&A. I want to go back to presentations real quick, and I want to show one more, additional, expansion of what we showed in the presentations. We'll spend a few minutes on that, just really to kind of get you thinking about what's possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back to all presentations. I'm going to make a new presentation again. We'll just give this a test name. Again, XD1034. We'll go ahead and start. Again, we're back at this canvas, and we're going to work with a video or image full screen. So I'm going to double click this zone. And what I want to show you is kind of the next step in the evolution of thinking about building your presentations. What we demonstrated really quickly was working with assets, videos, images, dragging and dropping them in. We have a widgets tab, and these are little functions, little objects and modules, and they're widgets, for lack of better words, that you can use in your presentation to build, really interesting and dynamic content. So that's part of what's really interesting. Now, in the upper right, we have this interactive toggle, and this is the go crazy button, right? So when when you
This is
toggle
where all
this,
the magic happens.
this is yeah, the whole world changes all of a sudden, right? So when you toggle the interactive button, a lot of stuff changes here, and starting from the top, we have an events panel that suddenly opens up. And events have special meaning for us. Um, we have these assets and we have these widgets at the bottom, and we have this working canvas here in the middle. So let's talk about it. I want to talk about states and events. I think those are two core concepts that you need to be aware of, and I think are really the foundational building blocks of what you'll use in presentations. So let's grab a media item just like we did before. So I'm going to grab a video. I'm going to put it in this zone. And this looks similar to before, but what we have here is the ability to start building, multiple building blocks of different things in this canvas. And they're not really connected to each other anymore like they were in the first example. So what you have the capability of doing here is building in this canvas what I like to think of as a process flow. This is kind of a flow chart or you know a a playlist of sorts of how you want your presentation to run. All of these main building blocks are things that we call states, just as in a general sense, it's considered a state. And the way that you drive your process is through events. And that's what you have here at the top. You have a wide variety of events to choose from. A good example of an event would be when a video stops playing. We have an event that's called media end. So I can attach an event to this state and I can tell it where I want it to go when that event happens. So you can see I've kind of like connected the event and I've dragged it over to the next state. And all I've done is I've said, well, you know what, play this video. And when it's done, go play the next video. It's fundamentally the same thing that I did in the first example, right? But now I have much more control over how this works. Other events, which we alluded to earlier, could be a touch. Let's say you attached a touch screen or you even had a mouse connected. So I could say, well, when the second video is touched or someone clicks on the screen, then I want to drive an event off of that and then go to something else. This is the fundamental building blocks of the presentation, states and events.
The way I like to think about it is a state is the content you see on the screen for the most part. And then an event is like a trigger that causes the player to transition to a new state.
Exactly, exactly. And there is so much to cover in here. We could spend, several hours of several shows going through each. But I think like if you just think of it this way, I'm working in this zone, I'm building this process flow, I've got states and events, and you start to build these logic and just really experiment with ways that you can drive, this content in your presentation. I think
Well,
that's the
let's
best
keep it
approach.
high level for
High
today.
level, exactly, exactly. So quick sneak peek. I think we want to show a little bit of maybe what's possible.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Go ahead and talk through this one, Matt.
Yeah, so this is a Nextmosphere demo kit that we have, and it has a bunch of different interactive triggers. It's got USB, lighting, it's got buttons. It's all done through this USB port. So there's buttons, there's LED, there's a lift and learn feature, there's a magnet. So these are all different like retail things that you can do, different triggers you can have that are connected to a display. And perhaps maybe you lift something up and then it plays content specific to what you've lifted up. So, I mean, the sky's
Right.
the limit with that
And
stuff.
those would be events, right? So, push a button and that button constitutes an event, in BrightAuthor
Exactly.
Connected, and then it drives,
Yeah.
other content.
Yeah, and there's a couple of others. Right now, we're looking at the Nextmosphere. In a moment, we're going to see another one, and I can talk about that in a moment. But these, yeah, that's at the foundation. We've got the states and the events, and uh, I think that it's just a very powerful way that you can interact with the BrightSign ecosystem.
Yeah, and it's really up to your imagination of how again, going back to the question of can it be done? Yes, of course. The challenge is then figuring out how and what pieces to put together, and you know, really I think what it boils down to is what are the states, what are the events, how are they connected, and how are you working with them, with respect to each other. So
Once you press that interactive button, really BrightAuthor Connected turns into a visual programming language. That's really what's happening. And you're linking things together and connecting things up so that different, basically, you're creating programs, right? You're creating applications.
exactly, exactly. Okay, so we are rapidly getting to our 5 minute mark.
Yeah, we're almost there.
I'm thinking we
Thank you,
should
everyone, for watching.
we should get some
We're going to
questions,
get to
right?
it. We do have a couple
We
questions that
do. All
came in.
right, let's do that.
Yeah. So the first question, we kind of alluded to it a bit, but Jason asks, are we moving away from standalone devices?
We moving away? No.
Yeah. Are we going to abandon standalone devices?
No way. I don't see how we would want to do that. No. I
No,
think it's a
I don't see how we would do that either.
yeah.
Um, I think that it's pretty core anyway,
Yep.
even though obviously having a player connected to the internet makes your player a lot more useful to you.
Right.
But there are situations where we understand, hey, you don't have a connection to the internet, and that's fine too.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have another question. This one's pretty complicated, and a we have a little bit of an answer to it. So the question is, James uh, Contende says that they're working with Mobicast in Uganda, and the
Okay.
screens use Novastar receiving cards. Therefore, currently we're using Nova Taurus players, but would like to try out BrightSign players and software.
Okay.
Do the BrightSign players, are they compatible with Nova receiving cards? And what we did a little research while you were watching, and it says that there's an 84 pin connector for the Nova Star, and we don't have access to that. So it's possible that you could use the GPIO function that we have, but you might have to do some soldering or some engineering on the back end to have it. I don't think it would be plug and play.
Sounds like something we
So I
should
think we
follow
need a
up
little
and
more research about that
yeah,
one.
we should definitely research that one. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think we need a little more information to answer
Yeah.
that. So we might follow up with you later.
Okay. Yep.
And then we also have a question from Luis. And the question is, so using BrightAuthor Connected has enhanced features, or basically does BrightAuthor Connected have advanced features over the regular BrightAuthor?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think there's certainly we're very, very close on feature parity between BrightAuthor, BrightAuthor Connected. You know, if we aren't already, it's very, very close. There is definitely some advanced things or enhanced things rather that you can do in BrightAuthor Connected now that are unique. The you know really the goal of having it integrated with Control Cloud, with being able to manage all your device setup types, tight integration with our CMS partners, as well as all of the presentation widgets and feature capability. I think that alone is an enhancement above you know the BrightAuthor Classic, if you will. So yes.
And then our last question from Jason. He's asking, do you know if there are any ways to parse the log information? He's found the logs are somewhat difficult to find the info that he wants. Do you know anything about that? And if you don't, we had some research. Our trusty assistant today did some research, and I have a little bit of information. So, John.
Okay. Not specific. I guess it depends what you're looking for. A lot of times when you're creating content, you can. It depends what you're trying to troubleshoot specifically. If you're building content, let's say in HTML, JavaScript, Node.js, you can trigger console messages and do event handling and then basically search or parse through those logs that way. I guess it kind of depends. I mean, what did we determine from our quick research, Matt?
Yeah. So Connie says that we were a so it's a simple text file. So you could do a file find, right?
Right.
If you need to find specific information. So that's like the easiest answer. But that Microsoft does have a log parser, but she doesn't know if it will work with BrightSign log files. So you have to try that out
Yeah.
yourself, or
Might
maybe
might
you can
warrant
do a
some
little more
follow up just to
research.
see what exactly needs to be parsed. I mean, we could certainly make some suggestions based on the context of what's trying to be done here. I think that's
Mhm.
that's probably our best
Right.
answer.
And then we also have so one more question um, from Katende, and the question is BrightSign looking at programmatic DOOH and audience measurements? I don't
So
even know what that means. So John, I'm gonna rely on you for that one.
digital out of home. That's one of those cool
Ah,
industry acronyms. Our partners do. I mean, we lean heavily on our partners, for a lot of, this really cool functionality. So, Nexmosphere in particular, I think we probably cut off the video right when it did it. They actually do some of those measurements. Blue Fox, is another one that comes to mind. So, yes, I mean, I don't know that we specifically have, kind of a plug and play, audience measurement, in BrightAuthor Connected, but that's very much in the realm of what our partners do, and some of them specialize. This is what they do, very, very effectively. So yes,
Right on, John. I think we are at the hour.
we
I'm
did
so
it.
glad that we were able to spend this hour together. And thank you, everyone who was watching online. We hope you enjoyed this presentation of BrightSign Live.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope everybody found it useful. Be sure to reach out. Let us know other stuff that you want to see. If you want more detail on certain things, and then definitely stay tuned. We're going to have more content, more topics. This is going to be a regular thing for us.
Right on.
Alrighty.
Well, have a great rest.